the 4th year in a row, we are reporting on our student performance on PARC, the partnership that the New Jersey State Department of Ed has entered into with the PARC Consortium. That's the assessment that we deliver. And I'm not going to go point for point because a lot of this can be viewed and also reviewed, should you choose. The presentation will be on our district website tomorrow. As I mentioned, this is the 4th year that last spring actually was the 4th year for which we administered the PARC. And all students in grades 3 through 11 take a English language arts assessment that is the assessment to really determine their achievement with end of year grade standards for that grade when it comes to English language arts standards. And in mathematics, students 3 through 8 take a mathematics exam, and then at the high school level, students, depending on their enrollment in certain courses, take an end of course exam in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Really, the information that we get back as a result of the students taking these assessments is crucial. Regardless of what assessment or platform is administered, measuring a student's success or knowledge of grade level content standards is integral to knowing how to best formulate instruction for that student moving forward. It's really like a diagnosis. You know, when you go for your yearly checkup with your doctor and they do blood work and they take your blood pressure and they do check-ins on your overall health. It's kind of like a check-in on students' overall academic health and well-being and where they stand in relation to the standards or the skills and concepts that the state recognizes that they should have proficiency with or achievement with on any given year. We as district administrators and our teachers use this data to plan instruction for the following year for those students based upon their results. Students use this data, and especially in the older grades, to evaluate their own overall academic performance and profile in setting personal goals for themselves and where they need to maybe refocus or double down on certain skills or concepts. And we also look at it as administrators and teachers in reflecting on how did we do last year with those students. So where do we maybe need to change in the way we deliver curriculum or what our curriculum, the resources that we use to best meet the needs of any given student in any given grade. It also allows teachers to self-reflect on maybe, how come my students in my class didn't do so well as my neighbor next door? And what are you doing differently when it comes to the use of synonyms, in my students' writing, or antonyms, or other forms of written language or skills. It also allows us to track areas where students may need specific remediation or intervention and prescribe specific types of interventions to address those areas where they need to show growth beyond what would, in addition to what is expected in that current year that they're now in. And with that, I'm going to just remind everyone that if you have a student in the district who took one of these assessments, the reports remain unchanged. And we're glad to report that another year came by and we got the data results even quicker. So each year, as we've administered PARC, it has gotten better. The turnaround time and our ability to get results to parents has really improved. And the way that the state reports out on student performance is on a rubric, a 5-scale rubric, with 5 indicating that the student is actually exceeding grade level expectations. 4 is kind of like what we target, like that is like what we minimally expect of students. That means that they are meeting whatever is expected of them in that particular content or grade level. And then as we see other levels like 3, 2, and 1, that's where we draw additional attention and maybe that's where we put additional interventions or services in place for students who aren't meeting the grade level expectations. So there's a lot of numbers that are up here on the screen. And by state code, we are obligated to report out on these results in such a kind of overwhelming, granular way. Thank you. But again, you can go back and revisit this. If you are a parent in the district or if you're just a community member and you would like to see a more thorough report out on a specific school's set of students' performance, the building principals will be giving a building-specific review of their building data at future PTA meetings. Those mostly occur in November and December as a follow-up to this. But I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mrs. O'Hagan. Mrs. O'Hagan is our district director of content such as English language arts. So she's going to speak specifically to our students' results when it comes to that area.
I will second everything that Mrs. Peakus just said regarding the way that we use the data. The test in and of itself doesn't have any value unless we can take the data that it then provides us and inform our instruction and have our teachers differentiate and target individual student goals. So what this shows you here is 3 years worth of data, 3rd grade through 11th grade, from 2016, 2017, 2008. What this doesn't show, and the way that we like to look at data, is what's called a cohort analysis. Like, we want to look at the 3rd graders from 3 years ago and see how they did in 4th grade and then in 5th grade and track their progress over time. That really is the only true way to measure the effectiveness of our instruction. And we are now very fortunate to have Linkit as a tool to help us analyze data, drill down, sort and sift, and create custom reports so that we are really able to pinpoint needs. And Mrs. Van Glon, Mrs. Merrow and I have already got some ideas about things that we know we want to do in certain grade levels that are a direct result of our studying the data that has been analyzed through Linkit. They actually take all of the state data and they then put it in a very useful format for us to drill down. This shows our 2018 English Language Arts results for grades 3 through 8. You can go over them again at your leisure. I don't want to read a list of numbers to you. What you can see, though, in the last 3 columns indicate the state score, Middletown Public Schools scores, and the green arrows next to the first columns all indicate that our students in all of those levels are scoring well above the state averages. In grades 10 and 11, we have a significant problem with our students engaging in the assessment in 10th and 11th grade. We're hoping that changes to the part that Mrs. Peakus will explain later on in the presentation is going to help us overcome this resistance that 10th and 11th graders seem to have to taking the assessment seriously. Last year in 2017, we had 6,428 students participate in the English Language Arts assessment across the district, and this year we had a slight uptick of a little more than 120 additional students, 6,548, which means we are getting more participation and fewer people deciding not to take the assessment.
Okay, now the math slides. That looks an awful lot like the English Language Arts slide. It's the same setup. Each of the levels for 3 years, it shows the percentage of students who scored in that level each of the 3 years, 2016, 17, and 18. Again, this is something you'd want to look at more leisurely on the website when it's put up if you're interested. I'm going to reiterate what Mrs. O'Hagan said. Cohort data is much more important. Looking and seeing how the same child did from 3rd to 4th to 5th, or the same group from 3rd to 4th to 5th, comparing this year's 3rd to last year's 3rd to the year before is really not as useful data-wise, but that's how the state sets up the template, so that's what we're providing, okay? This slide also, you notice something looks very similar in the last column. At every grade level from 3rd straight through to Algebra 1. Remember, some of our students take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, and some of them take Algebra 1 in 9th grade. If you take it in 10th grade, but whenever they take Algebra 1, they're grouped together. That's what's different about math. It's by subject come high school, not by grade, okay? But you can see that we exceeded the state in every grade, all the way up to Algebra 1, and then comes geometry and Algebra 2. Same issues with the 10th and 11th graders for the most part, either not taking the test or not taking it seriously, not a graduation requirement, those kinds of things at that point in that age. So, okay? This is also the participation slide for mathematics. In math, it's a little different than language arts. You can see the participation was slightly 1/3 of 1% less in 2018 than it was in 2017. We give the math test after the language arts test. So they take several days of language arts, then they take math. I suspect that has something to do with why less kids were taking it at that point. Some of them may be tested out, among other things, but either way, there was slightly less in math. Not significant, however. Okay, this slide is about our SATs. Since we're talking about testing performance, we're also including the SATs, because that is a test that, of course, high schools give throughout the country. And the 11th graders last June compared to the 11th graders the June before, if you compare the yellow line, which is the most recent data that we have, to the line underneath it, the row underneath it, you can see the number of students that took the test was off by 1. It's almost the exact same number of students, coincidentally. Okay, you can compare High School North last year to this year, and I believe the difference is like 39 points higher this year than last year at High School North. Nice, right? At High School South, it's about 9 points lower. It's not significant, but you know, kudos to North. Again, it's different students in the 11th grade this year than last year that may have taken it. Different size student body too. And then the last two columns are the most interesting, and that's something I want to draw attention to. The district mean score 1146 last year compared to the previous year. Notice it's higher. It went from 1122 to 1146. However, in the state it went down, but Middletown went up. So that's, you know, congratulations to Middletown. That's something worth noting. Okay? All right. You're probably aware that in the past we have also tested our students on science and had that data to share, but we have no data to share this year because the tests last year were field tests. The science standards changed, and we're now teaching the next generation science standards, K-12, throughout the state and in our district. So they're testing out new questions. It's a much more rigorous test they're giving, but again, we have no data. They didn't give us back data after last year's field test. We expect this year, when the test counts and it's not a field test, that we will be getting data back for next year to look at. So stay tuned for science.
Thank you, Mrs. Caruso. As she just mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe it was seconds as fast as you talked.
Yeah, maybe.
There will be some changes coming to the statewide assessment that will be delivered to all students. If you've been following the news, you may have seen that there have been articles. The governor has been did form a task force comprising of educators, parents, students across the state to look at what he felt was something that he had received as feedback, which was that we needed to make some changes to the PARCC assessment. So what they have announced and will be up to the New Jersey Board of Education, the overall statewide Board of Education will be voting on this shortly, is what we've been told. But the proposal that they have received includes reducing the overall length of time and length of tests when it comes to the statewide administration. So across the different grade levels, the ELA units in each grade will be reduced from 3 tests, or 3 units they call them, to 2 units, which means the overall number of questions will be reduced, and the overall length of time in the administration of the test will be reduced approximately 75 to 90 minutes overall, just for language arts. And in mathematics, they're also looking at fewer testing blocks or units and reducing the overall length of the math administration from 60 to 90 minutes overall, an overall reduction. In addition, this is the big change that I think will likely address some of the situation that we're seeing, some of the issues we've been seeing the last couple of years with our grade 10 and 11 ELA results and our Algebra 2 and Geometry results. As you can see behind me, what the state is proposing, what the DOA is proposing for the state board to approve, is that they will officially recognize taking the ELA grade 10 assessment as the measure to indicate that a student has met their high school graduation responsibility, so that if by passing the ELA 10 statewide assessment, you'll have met your high school graduation requirement. The same will be true of the Algebra 1 assessment. That will meet your mathematics and, of course, high school graduation requirement. They are reinstituting what they called a menu of options that they had about 2 or 3 years ago that were due to be phased out. They're reintroducing alternate measures or ways in which students can demonstrate or meet their high school graduation requirement, and that can be after they have sat through all of the required assessments. So it is a student who, whether they pass, show proficiency or meeting expectations or not, they will have had to have sat for each of the assessments for the course that they have taken that are available. And if they fail to meet the expectation or earn at least a 4 on that grading rubric that this PARCC uses, then they can also use an ACT score, an SAT score, ASVAB, or AccuPlacer score to meet graduation requirement. This is just an example of what an overall student performance report looks like if you don't have a student. If you do, you've seen this, and you know exactly it is a sliding scale that the report indicates. It shows in the arrow where your student score lies, and it shows where it is in relation to the overall scoring mechanism.
Those are clickable links.
And that's my last slide. So this will all be available on the district website. Those clickable links are there. It helps you better understand your students' report, as well as translation services for any parents who need a Spanish version or other language. Okay, thank you very much. Board members have any questions?
Thank you so much for doing that.
Actually, Kim, I do have a
Yes.
question. If the student doesn't achieve a passing grade in the Algebra 1 or ELA 10 and goes to that menu, are any of those menu options, the SAT, the ACT, I'm not familiar with the other two, are any of them offered free of charge because then you have to pay to take the ACT and the SAT?
Mr. Ranella, the ASVAB, I believe, is available for all students free of charge, correct? And AccuPlacer, I believe we administer in the district. Is there a nominal fee? I think it's a nominal fee. Yeah. As former high school principal, I knew you might have a better recollection of that than I would. It's been a while since I thought about that.